Welcome everyone to the Living Parsha. In this week's class, we are going to be delving into the three forms of leadership, three types of leadership. Now, leadership, being a leader, is something that we all are. We are all leaders in our own lives. We look to leaders, which we sometimes have a hard time spotting, at least on the political sphere, and everything is governed by leaders, right? In business, in all aspects, we have leadership, the importance of leadership. And so today we're going to delve into three levels of leadership, and I think it's a very fascinating discussion because it really goes into the way that we govern, that we have different types of governments and where they draw their inspiration from. So obviously we're talking about this because we have in this week's Parsha, we have two leaders that are coming head to head, right? Vayigash elav Yehuda, that Judah came up to Yosef, and essentially said, you know, you've got to let Binyamin, you've got to let him go. Otherwise, I'm going to take you on. I'm going to war with you. And the Midrash tells us that this was a battle of the kings. That's how the Midrash puts it. The Zohar says the same thing, that it's a battle of the kings. It was two kings, two types of outlooks on life that Judah had and that Joseph had, and they went head to head. And in the Midrash, it describes that this war was a war between the energy of the lion, which was Judah, and the energy of what was Joseph's energy? What's his, we could say his animal, who was he? Right? Do you remember?
Sure.
Right. So, right? It's the ox. Exactly. Thank you, Diane. It's the ox. And it says that Joseph had the power of the ox, but had the beauty of the in Hebrew it's called a re'em, and it's a gazelle, and it has a beautiful horns coming out. Yet the ox doesn't have beautiful horns, right? They're very short and stocky, and so Yosef was this combination of strength and beauty, and essentially Yosef also represents the perfect individual. He represents the tzaddik, while Yehuda represents the Baal Tshuva, the master of return. Later on in history, we have the reenactment, basically, of this war going on later on when the two kingdoms of Israel, Judah became split from the rest of Israel, right? And where there were two leaders, there were the leaders that came from Judah, and then there was the leaders that came from Ephraim, which was Joseph's lineage. And these two forms of leadership are leaderships that we see throughout history. And so we're going to be touching upon like these different forms of leadership and what they represent and how they represent really the leaderships that we have inside of us. And then we're going to look into a third level of leadership, and that's the leadership of Moshe, right, of Moses. So basically the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot tells us that there are three crowns, that there's the crown of Keter Torah, there's the crown of Torah, there's the crown of Kehuna, the crown of priesthood, and then there's the Keter Malchut, there's the crown of kingship. And then it says, V'keter Shem Tov Ole al Kulam. We have the Keter, there's a fourth crown. So although we could say there's three levels of government, of kingship, but there's a fourth level really that we're just going to really, that encompasses all of them, and that's Keter Shem Tov. The Keter Shem Tov, a good name, surpasses all of these three levels of Ktarim, of crowns. So what are these three crowns? The Keter Torah, the crown of Torah, represents the level of who? Of Yosef. He was this embodiment. He was called Ben Skunim. He was the son of his father, but it says Ziv Ikunim. He had the same face as Yaakov, and he was given the secrets that Yaakov received in the house of Shem ve'Ever. All the secrets, the profound secrets of creation, he gave over to his son, to Yosef, which is why his brothers, who are older than him, are like, why doesn't Dad talk to us? Why doesn't he teach us this like profound wisdom? He's giving it over to this kid. Now he's like a 17-year-old like teenager, and he's getting all the wealth. He's getting all of the depth of Torah, right? Which went into this whole conflict, which basically led to Joseph being sold and finding himself in Egypt. So we've got Keter Torah, we have Keter Kehuna, the crown of priesthood, and who's that? That would basically be Moses. Although we think Moses is Torah, but Moses represents really the level of priesthood. It says Moshe was supposed to be the high priest, and he gave it over to Aaron, and he became Moshe was the Kohen Gadol, but then he transferred it over to Aaron, right? And he came from the tribe of Levi. So we've got these basically two tribes so far. We've got the tribe of Yosef, the tribe of Levi, and then we've got the third tribe, which is Keter Malchut, the tribe of, we have the crown of kingship, which is Judah. And the tribe of Judah represents kingship. So let's try to understand leadership. The leadership in the scenario of our story over here. We see basically another leader, a fourth leader who's supposed to be a leader. And his name was Reuven. He was the firstborn. He was the eldest. And when the brothers get together and they're like, let's throw Joseph into the pit, Reuven doesn't know how to stand, doesn't know how to assert his leadership. And he's essentially a very docile, he's a very passive older brother. He doesn't assert his strength. He doesn't assert his ability to say, listen, I have veto power. I'm able to rule you guys out. You guys are not touching this kid. And yet afterwards he comes to, to help Yosef when, he says he wants to come and he wants to save them, to save Yosef. He says, don't kill him. Let's throw him into the pit. So he does have this level of leadership, but this leadership is very passive. He's got the people that are leading him. The brothers are leading him. And he's saying, I can't stop them. So let's just not kill him, but at least, throw him into a pit. And then afterwards, really his intentions were pure. He said, let's save him. I'm going to save him. I'm going to come in and out and I'm going to save my little brother there. But that wasn't good enough because by then he was already sold. He was already out of the pit and they got 20 shekel for it, which they went and they bought shoes for. It says, and the brothers, split the funds over there. But who said, let's sell him? It was Judah. It was Yehuda that said, let's get him out of the pit. We're not making anything off of this. Like basically, let's, why not? Let's just sell him. And his brothers are like, really? We don't really like him that much. No, we're going to sell him. And they listen to Yehuda. And Judah gets the last say. And that's what they do. Yehuda has this leadership ability and that he essentially fits into the leader role, whereas Reuven did not get that leadership role. And he lost his firstborn right. But then as the story continues on, we've got Yosef that emerges as the leader, because when the brothers when Yehuda had the dreams with the brothers there, and they were all bowing down to him, it was signifying that something in the future is going to show that Yosef is really going to emerge as a leader. And that's indeed what happened. He became a viceroy. He became the second in command of the king of Paro. And he became the most important person in the entire world, basically, that saved the whole world from starvation. So Yosef becomes the leader of not only his family, but he becomes the leader of the whole world. And we've got, in these two personalities, we've got the level of what we call the Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. These two types of leaders are signifying two types of lights of leadership, of showing the way, showing an example to the world. Two types of examples. And what are these two examples? So the example of Yosef is the example of the perfect tzaddik. Yosef is called a tzaddik elyon. Binyamin was tzaddik tachton. Yosef was tzaddik elyon, and he was called Yesod. He's channeling down the light of his father, right? Ziv ikunim. He was the light of his father, right? Like it says in the Zohar that Yosef was the same face as Yaakov, and Yaakov was the same face as Adam. And basically, Yosef was Adam in this world. He was channeling down an immense level of what we call shefa, of abundance into this world. And he represents the perfect individual because his mother was that perfect woman as well. She was beautiful on the inside. She was beautiful on the outside. She was this amazing perfection. And Yosef had the same thing. He was brains and he was looks. Not only was he brains, he was an incredible business person, and he was an incredible wheeler and dealer. Everyone liked him. The minute they saw Yosef, Yosef, and not only that, Yosef ish matzliach. Vehi Yosef matzliach. Yosef is matzliach all the time. He's like doing well. He has atzlacha. Yes, and then he's not called matzliach. He's called ish matzliach. His whole essence is atzlacha. He's changed his whole wiring, his whole biology, to just be this abundance, something that just draws abundance into his, not only his life, because since he represents Yesod, it draws the abundance into the whole world. He's called an Ish Matzliach. And he represents the leader, which is, again, the ox. It has so much power to it in this physical world, yet it has the horns. What do the horns represent? It represents something which is now, like, how do you say horns in Hebrew? It's called karnaim, keren. A keren represents the essence itself. Like when you have like the essence, like vayarim keren le'amo, right? And it says, for example, about Moses, that when he came down from the mountain, that it says that he had karnei or, he had like the horns of light. So Michelangelo drew Moses, not drew him, he sculpted Moses with horns, right? And that's why people still think that Jewish people have horns on some level, and they're like, oh, well, you have a kippah, and like underneath that, you show us the horns. Wow. Yeah. But it comes from the word keren. Keren means a horn, literally. But it doesn't just mean a horn, it also means keren means a ray of light, right? Karnei or, like it says about the sun. The sun, there's a ray of light, keren or. So the karnaim, the horns of Yosef represent this immense radiance that he had. He had the physical presence, we could say powerful individual, that you're like, well, that's a powerful individual. And he had this aura about him that was this incredibly successful and powerful aura. So Yosef represents the leader who is this incredible, perfect leader. We all know people like that. that, they're perfect on the outside, they're perfect on the inside, right? There's people like that, and they're like, well, God bless you. Like, that's amazing. You are blessed to have been born to this, family, although Joseph wasn't born to that family, but he was born to that family, but he went through a lot in his life to achieve that. But again, Joseph represents that level of a leader that this person has just a knack to just be successful, and they just ace things, even though not necessarily in school, but like in life, because you could be a very poor student and then be very successful in other aspects of your life, in after school, right? In business, right? I know, like most, right? Like Mark Twain said, I never let my schooling get in the way of my learning, right? It's like, so Yosef represents that level of a leader, that level of an individual that has this grace, has this chen, and they get into a job, they get into a business that they're starting, and all of a sudden they make the connections, and then another thing happens, and another thing happens. Before you know it, wow, or if it's in politics, or when we're talking about this on the spiritual level, there are tzaddikim, there are holy people that are on this level of Yosef. There's a tzaddik, which is a level which is called tzaddik elyon, right? Tzaddik yesod olam. There is a tzaddik, and again, we have Mashiach ben Yosef. We have the level of Mashiach ben Yosef, that this level of a tzaddik is perfect, drawing down the light of the infinite into this world. Now, Rabbi Chaim Vital said that we already had Mashiach ben Yosef, and that was the Arizal. When the Arizal passed in 1570, he said that his light in this world was this light of Mashiach ben Yosef, right? Which soon we're going to talk about Judah in a second. But first, right, understanding that before Judah could shine, we have to have Yosef shining before Yehuda. We have Yosef that's shining before. And on the level of the perfection of the world, we have to have this combination of the spiritual and the physical. Someone that's able to draw down this light on both realms. That they're able to represent a perfection. Like when Rabbi Chaim Vital said that when the Arizal would walk through the streets of Tzfat, people used to hide because he used to read people, and not only this lifetime, and you would see reincarnations of their life, and they would just be like, whoa. And he said that if the Arizal would have lived for another 10 years, he would have brought half the world to do teshuvah, to return back and to uplift their consciousness. Basically, that's really what it means, that their consciousness would have been uplifted because there's such a high caliber of Wi-Fi spiritual holiness in the world. That's basically what it means. And we all get that Wi-Fi. When there's a spiritual holiness that's in the world coming from what we call a tzaddik, and we know that there's 36 hidden tzaddikim in the world, representing the 36 candles that we light throughout Hanukkah. There are 36 hidden tzaddikim that we pick up from their bandwidth, from their Wi-Fi, right? Whether we know it or not, but they're hidden. And then there's Yosef, and there's tzaddikim like Yosef, and tzaddikim like that in the world that were on that level, such as the Baal Shem Tov, such as Risol of Ruzhin, the Alter Rebbe, the great Kabbalists that were the Ramak, right? All these incredible lights, pillars of light that were in the world that awakened so many other people in the world, but they sort of put themselves at risk. These tzaddikim put themselves at risk. That's the idea of Mashiach ben Yosef. They were supposed to pray for him not to die, basically, right? Not to die young, and which is what happened with the Ari. And that's what happened with a lot of the great lights like that. For example, Rabbi Nachman also died at 38, right? Rabbi Chaim the Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, right, a great Kabbalist, died also at the age of 38. There were these pillars of light that were almost like they endangered themselves because they felt that they wanted to bring down this bandwidth of light to the world that was going to be a light which is so obviously holy and spiritual. You don't need to be a genius to say, okay, there's godliness in the world. When people would walk by the Lubavitcher Rebbe for $1, they had, by seeing those eyes and by being in that aura, they were like, there's godliness here. There's awe. The person will become transformed just by the proximity that you have to authentic holiness, undeniable. And that's the idea of Yosef. Yosef was this bandwidth of holiness in the world, right? So we could understand this level of leadership on multi-levels. We could understand it on the tzaddik level, on the holiness level. We could understand it on a business level. We could understand it on our personal level as well, that we have a level of Yosef within us. What's the level of Yosef within us? The level of Yosef within us is the level which is that part of ourselves, which we know we have our strengths. We naturally shine. We naturally shine in this or that situation. We have these strengths, we have these talents, and we know it. Like we could show up, and if it's a great artist or a great musician, you just know that you shine in that circumstance, in that situation. So that's the Joseph inside of you, right? That's that level of Yosef, which is just obviously an unbelievably natural, shining presence. So that's Joseph. What about Judah? What about Yehuda? So Yehuda represents, thank you so much. Yehuda represents the Baal Tshuva, the master of return. The Baal Tshuva, the master of return, and the lion. The lion represents the desire, the will. He's the king. But when the lion roars, the lion, everyone hears him. The entire jungle knows that the lion won something. And that calling comes from a very deep inner place that the lion has called. The lion is speaking, the lion has roared. You better listen because he's affirming, right? He wants something. And that represents the leader that is constantly working on himself. And we see the epitome of this type of a leader with King David HaMelech, the offspring of Judah, right? He was a king, Yehuda was the king, but King David was the king who's called the master of return. He erred, right, with the story of Bathsheba and the story in other situations, yet he got back on his feet and he implemented his whole level of leadership by raising up others. And we could say in many ways, it's almost like a democratic form of leadership, whereas Joseph is more of this monarchy, right? Judah is this more of this democratic level of leadership. In other words, that the leader is someone who's one that's within the people. He's gone through his or her trials and tribulations, right? He's vulnerable. He has failed. He's gotten down, but he got back up, down and up, multiple times, hundreds of times. Who knows, right? But it's someone that is working on themselves by example, leading by example. But the example is not the example of perfection. It's the example of endurance. It's the example of courage. And that's a very powerful way of leading, because one is not leading by saying, I'm perfect and I've got it all. Rather, it's saying that I know what it's like to feel what you're feeling. I've been there. I've had that. I've done that. And when you say to someone that, then how does the person feel when they know what you're talking about? When you can get into exactly where they're at and how to help them get out of where they're at, it's huge. But you could have never done it if you were never there. And here, the whole getting down, where it says about Yehuda, it says in Jacob's blessing for Judah, he says that kara ravatz kari, that he gets down like a lion, right? When a lion gets down, he's like down, but then he's just about to leap. Watch out. It looks like the lion is just, crouching, and he's just, chilling. He's just like relaxing there, not doing anything. But if you're a couple of feet away, be careful, because he's going to pounce on you. That's the power of, like, you're going down, but it's just, the going down is just readying oneself to really get back up, but get back up in a way that's pouncing. And that's the idea of teshuvah. That's the idea of return. Because when you return, you don't go back to where you were at. You actually go way higher than you're at. And that level of going way higher than you're at is the power of the Baal Tshuva. And that's the power of Mashiach ben David. That's Mashiach. And that's basically redemption. And redemption starts through Mashiach ben Yosef, that we know that there's a reality like this in the world. There's God, there's holiness, there's tzaddikim that channel down. What's Mashiach ben David? Yehuda, it's within the world. That from within the world, we are transforming. The tshuva comes from the transformation that the world itself transforms. The world itself reveals its holiness. The holiness doesn't come from above, it comes from within. And again, understanding this maybe on a business level. So on this level, you have a leader that is leading by having the co-workers get together and discuss, by bringing in other modalities of learning. It's not just one level of teaching and learning, but it comes from cooperative level of teaching, of that, that there is an exercise that everyone needs to try to get to the bottom of. And so by doing that, everyone gets involved in the learning process, and everyone now gets to use their own self, their own mind, and their own heart in order to really solve the problem. That level of leadership, that level of teaching, in a sense, is in level of leading, is a level of Judah, of Yehuda. Yehuda is the master of tshuva. He goes down and he basically leads by example to his brothers. His brothers listened to him. Why did they listen to him and not to Reuven? Because Reuven was more like Yosef. Reuven was like this holier than thou kind of a guy in many ways. He was actually, it says he wasn't with them the whole time because he was mourning. He was constantly like praying, and he was constantly like aloof from everyone else because of, he switched the beds of Bilhah, it says, of Jacob afterwards. And so he was not in mourning, sorry, he was praying, he was asking, he was repenting. So the brothers were like, Reuven is just too holy for us. He's just too out there. Like, we don't get him. He's a good guy, but we don't really get him. But Yehuda was like a man of the people. He was there. He was like this, one of the boys, and he was just one of the guys, but not only one of the guys, he was a leader. Why? Because he was involved with them on all levels. He was talking about the ups and downs, and he was, he had the ears of his brothers. They're like, okay, this guy has what to say. This guy is able to lead us. And that's Yehuda, right? That's the power of Yehuda. Now we've got a third leader. And this third leader is Moses, right? So Moshe comes from the tribe of Levi. And we just came from the holiday of Hanukkah, where we had the energy of Moshe and the energy of the Levim, the energy of the Kohanim, that were called, these priests that went out to war. Now, what's the difference between the Levites and Moshe and the other forms of leadership is that this form is almost a supernatural level of leadership. It's different than Yosef, right? Levi is this powerful light that basically is able to connect both of these aspects together. Levi, the power of the kahuna of the Kohanim and Moshe, is that there's connection between these two realms, the higher worlds, which is what they represent, the Kohanim and the Levites, and Moshe spend most of his time in the upper worlds, yet they represent a yearning, a very deep yearning from the lower worlds. And that's why Moshe is known as the ultimate leader, because on the one hand, he's this spiritual person, and yet on the other hand, he's one with the people, and he's praying for the people, and he's praying for, and in fact, we know Moses, and he's known forever as the leader based on he's able to forego his Torah, right? The tablets which he brought down, because he broke them in order to help the people, to absolve them of their sin, right? Of what they've done with the sin of the golden calf. So he breaks his own tablets, which he's brought down, because in the tablets it says that they should not practice idolatry, which is what they're doing. And so he does that. So he's a master of tshuva, he's a master of return. So he's got these two elements. He's got this element of Joseph, and then he's got this element of Judah. And these two elements coming together is this element of, this perfection, which is why Moshe is known forever as, the greatest leader that we've had, right? And this is why in the story of Hanukkah, the Maccabees had a very hard time relinquishing, giving up their hold on the leadership. But we know, who does the leadership ultimately go to? So the leadership ultimately goes to Judah. And Joseph is involved with the leadership as well. Whereas the tribe of Levi, the tribe of the Levites, they are this connector. They're a leader that connects basically the leadership and the people together on a greater level. And it's done by connecting to the Levites assist the people in the world to really connect to their innate holiness, which they have. And by doing so, they're able to connect to themselves, but it's not enough to connect to themselves, because there's the two other crowns. There's the crown of Torah, but then there's the crown which represents Joseph. And then there's the crown of Malchut, the crown of leadership, right? And this crown of Malchut represents these, basically leadership is always Yehuda. Yehuda is always Malchut, because we always subdue ourselves to which form of leadership. So although Moshe was the greatest, at the end of the day, there's going to be a combination, and that's the combination of King David. And King David or Mashiach is this combination that is able to uplift the world, that reveals that the world itself is innately holy. And that's the uplifting of the realm which we call Malchut, kingship. In Kabbalah, it's called Malchut. That kingship becomes uplifted. So while Joseph represents Yesod, the end of what we call the Zer Anpin, the 6 Sfirot, the culmination of all the Sfirot, the 10th or the 7th of the emotional Sfirot is Malchut. And so on the level of Yesod and Malchut, which one is higher? Yesod is higher. Which is why Yehuda in our Parsha, he defers himself to Joseph. He says, Bi Adoni, like I'm speaking to you, and I am secondary to you. But on a deeper Kabbalistic level, what was happening is that Judah, who represents Malchut, says, Bi Adoni, that within me, your Shefa comes down from Paro, from Pharaoh, which Paro on a Kabbalistic level is not a villain anymore. He's in fact a very holy level. Paro, it says, the pariu mine kol nehorim. That's what the Zohar says, that all these lights become opened up. Paro on the realm of holiness represents the realm of Keter. So this realm of the supernatural, right, the metaphysical, the highest levels, right, is channeled down all the way to Yesod. So Yosef and Pharaoh work together. Yosef is Pharaoh's channel on that realm of holiness, drawing down abundance into this world. That's what Yosef represents on a sphera level. Yosef is the Sfirat HaYesod that's drawing down the light of Yesod, Tzadik Yesod Olam, into this world. But then Judah comes and he says, Bi Adoni. All the Shefa, all that abundance needs to go through me. Why? Because I'm Malchut. Malchut, I need to receive that Shefa. That needs to go through me. But when it goes through me, then what happens is you become uplifted. And then it represents, and then it shows that actually my form of leadership is really higher than yours, because in the Haftarah of this week's Parsha, it says that there's 2 branches. That says at the end of days, there's the branch of David, or the branch of Yehuda, and the branch of Ephraim and of Joseph. And these 2 branches are going to go together, but there's going to be one master. And Ephraim and Joseph is going to become secondary to Yehuda, representing that on the perfected level, Malchut, when it becomes channeled down properly, it goes up higher than Yesod, and it goes back to its source, which is Keter, and representing that the uplifting of the physicality, of the material, of the ego, right? When that becomes worked on, when that becomes uplifted, when that becomes transformed, there's a level of hitapcha, of transformation. That transformation brings down the light, a greater light than the pipeline of goodness that was there on the inceptional level. It draws down an even higher level, because it shows that Malchut is actually rooted in Keter. That's the root of Malchut, right? Kabbalah explains that the root of all of the physical, of the body, of the material, of the ego, of the self, what's its root? Its root is really Keter, is crown. So in a way, our body, the ego, although it seems like it's so lowly, is in a way higher than even the spiritual parts of ourselves, right? Even we could say the soul on some level, right? Because the soul comes down into this body, or into this world, in order to uplift the wiring and the limitation and the consciousness, the limiting beliefs that we all are born with, that we all have. We're here to really transform that. And when we do that, then on a spiritual level, we become superhuman. We become godly in a sense. That's really what happens. We become transformed because we draw down this immense, incredible light. That light is only found within matter, within what we call limitation, what we think is limitation. That limitation is not limitation. That limitation is the ultimate level of abundance, right? That's the level of Judah, and that's the level of King David, and that's the level of the uplifting of the physicality that we are experiencing, right? And that we're going to see in Mashiach and redemption, and that's basically where we're all going to, right? So we've got these two levels of leadership which is going on, and perhaps we could say this on a government level. That right now, on a government level, throughout the world, we've never had this type of lack of leadership, basically. And whatever you say, whoever's chosen as a leader, they're not really chosen by, they're like 51%, like you barely made it as the leader. There's 49% of the people that want you out really fast. And they're going to try to be that 51 next time. And you're like, we're going back and forth, because what's going on is that the world itself, we're vying for leadership. What kind of leadership are we really looking at now throughout the world? We're not looking at monarchies. We don't have that. We don't have that. Mashiach ben Yosef has already, we could say, come. So we know what monarchies look like. We know what these big tzaddikim look like. That's why in our generation, we are not, like right now, the times that we're living in, we don't live in a time that we have like this great tzaddik, we could say, that is here in this world on that level, on that scale, that we could say, wow, that's like the Lubavitcher Rebbe, that's the Baba Sali, that's the Satmar Rebbe, that's like, like these incredible like lights. Why is that? Because we're all meant to find that light. We are doing that work. We are doing that work of Judah. We are that level of leadership that within the world, that the world itself becomes transformed. The world itself needs to transform, and it's transforming within us. We are transformed. We are that Judah realm that is taking our thoughts, and drawing awareness to where we're actually, taken to in our thoughts, where we're, what we're reacting to, what we are add in our actions. How do we work to shift those? And how do we look not just at others in that, in a better light? How do we look at ourselves in a better light? And how do we do that? That is this level of teshuvah, basically. That's this level of return, being a master of return. Being a master of return, it says about Mashiach that he's going to teach the world, and that's what King David did, teach the world teshuvah, the power of teshuvah. And he says in the Zohar that Mashiach is going to cause even the tzaddikim, even people like Joseph, to do teshuvah. Mashiach is going to cause the tzaddikim to do teshuvah. How do you do that? They're already perfect. What are you talking about? The answer is no. They are shining down on a certain frequency, but the frequency of the returning light, that idea of the returning light, that from the world itself, there's the transformation. That's an unbelievable thing. Rabbi Nachman says that he would be aware of his thoughts, that he would know that the ups and downs that he would have, like hundreds of times a day. He would be in a certain place, and we feel like taken up and down. Like we have all these gadgets in our hands, so we have it like thousands of times a day. So of course we don't even know, we don't have the tools really to try to gauge, what do we do with these thoughts? Or how do we put down our device for a little bit longer? And how do we, become more aware of our thoughts and become more aware of that inner world. And that's the world of Judah, right? That's the world of King David. And we had these two forms of leadership with an individual that was called Yerovam. Yerovam was from the tribe of Ephraim. He was a genius of proportions. It says that he would be able to talk about 80 different ways of saying of how a dead rodent could be kosher in terms of like brilliance. Like he would be able to bring like this, what we call kal v'chomer, learning it this way, learning it that way, right? Incredible Talmudic genius that this person had. And he says that he was one of the three greatest individuals of his time, and perhaps of all time in many ways. And so Yerovam became the leader of a section of Israel. He basically broke up the kingdom of King Solomon, King David, King Solomon, and basically the kingdom of Israel split into two parts. There was the northern part, Samaria, and the northern part, and then there's the Judean area and tribe of Benjamin, and that's it, right? And they were broken up into these two leaders, the leaders of these two ideologies, essentially, right? And this exile happened to the 10 tribes, right? The tribe of and Yerovam was the leader. I mean, eventually we went on to other leaders, obviously, but it says in the Talmud that God says to King David and to Yerovam, he says to Yerovam, me, you, and the son of Jesse and Ben David are going to walk together in paradise. Are you ready for this? In other words, right? Chassidus, it's explained that, whoa, that's pretty huge. What does this mean? It means that these brilliant lights, me, you, like this light of Keter, basically this light of God, is going to shine down. Me, you is Yesod, shining down through Yesod, right? And the son of Jesse and King David are going to walk in paradise. To which Yerovam said, who's going to be first? Who's going to lead first? Can you imagine this question? Like, you have like private audience, you and someone else with like the greatest person in the world, right? You're like, who cares who walks in the door first? Like, who gets to sit next to him first? You've got the greatest honor ever. What are you talking about? But says that this haughtiness of Yerovam was what he asked. And to which God responds that the son of Jesse is going to be first. I'm sorry. Like, he didn't say, I'm sorry, but he's like, King David is going to be first. To which Yerovam says, I'm out. No deal. No deal. Can you imagine? What? Make a deal over here. Why can't you do that? In other words, this perfection of these two realms is the deal of Mashiach, which is what the idea of the splitting of these two kingdoms was all about. There was this merging of these two parts are the merging of these two realms of what we consider is the perfect, and that represents the way that we imagine that the perfect world needs to be like, and the perfect person needs to be like. And very often many of us are perfectionists, that I need to be like this. And it's a good thing to be a perfectionist on a certain level, not if it gets you, but to be, get you to like work on yourself and to really move. That's an amazing thing. But when that is so regimented and there isn't that inner reflection of what's going inside, then there's a problem with that. And that's the level of Judah, and that's the level of King David. This level of teshuvah, basically of uplifting of the physicality, the uplifting and the being aware, the awareness of what is happening. The transformation is so important. It's not just about the regimented, action level of like implementing, which is basically, so important for us in our Western world. We have this, what we call the world of Yefet. Yefet, there's Shem and Yefet, basically. Yefet represents this beauty and having things be done in the as perfect way as possible, right? That, our buildings need to be a certain way, and people need to look a certain way, and, especially when it comes to like women, there's like this, there's this emphasis on the outer world almost. There's this emphasis on the material. There's the emphasis on how is it looking, on the shining, on all the shine, all the glamour. Yosef is a glamorous person, and that represents glamour is very good. On a holy level, to be glamorous on a holy level, like it says about the Ruzhner, Rabbi Saul of Rizhin used to ride a beautiful carriage made of gold. And a lot of the other tzaddikim had like, if it's mansions and opulence. And why? Because there's something about that. There's something about using this opulence for holiness. So on the level of holiness, that is a good thing. But on the external level, that level of leadership, again, like monarchies don't work anymore, because people are like, you're the queen, and like, what are you exactly doing for us? Or you're the king of this, like, who cares? How does that help me in my life if you're a gazillionaire? It doesn't do anything for me. Power to the people, which is what happened in the French Revolution, basically, of how we have basically our, Western world pretty much started with the people, right? You guys remember Les Miserables? The whole, that whole rebellion. And that rebellion is the rebellion of the people. And so that's the idea of the leadership, which comes from within the people, or from within us. And that level of leadership is internal. It's a lot more internal. It's less shticky, we could say, less, glamorous. And it's about the goal. Oh, you look that way. Oh, you bought, that. Wow. You have that. Amazing. We want to be your friends. We want to be in your company. And it's not about that. That's not a true friend. That's not a sign of really importance of just how much money you have, right? That doesn't make you a good person. You haven't really, what have you contributed to the world just because you have outer things, right? When we look at like what is real wealth, it comes from something within. And, a lot of the billionaires, that have really set like a good example of, of like donating most of their sums to charity, which is basically saying it's like, it's not about how many billions, like you can't even spend it, even if if you wanted to, you could buy Twitter, like, but at the end of the day, what is it really going to do for you? And so it's the inner, but the inner doesn't mean that there isn't the abundance there, just the opposite. The greatest abundance is really there. But it comes through, we could say, a longer journey, a deeper journey, which is what we're seeing in our world, in humanity. We're seeing before Mashiach ben David comes, right? We're looking at, there's Mashiach ben Yosef, there's the external, there's the glamorous, there's the tzaddik. We're like, wow, there's the kings. And there's that type of like, leadership in the world. And we're like, whoa, there's leadership. But then that has now phased to it's coming from within. It's coming from the world transforms from within herself. There's that transformation on, basically it's a feminine level of transformation. There's much more of a feminine aspect of leadership from that point of view. That leadership on the feminine side is much less about, how much we execute, rather of how much we're really fully contributing. How much is our business contributing, not just to, the bottom line, but what is it really doing? Is it environmentally safe? Is it using, cheap labor? Is it recycling things? Is it like thinking about the world much more than just thinking about, taking the shortcuts on other people's backs and becoming a billionaire and just that's it, and living, quote, the good life, right? While, everyone else has suffered in between. So that level of leadership is the leadership of King David. It's the leadership of Judah, of Yehudah, which we are all really going through. We're in this feminine leadership type of a place. And this feminine level of leadership of teshuvah, being the Baal Teshuvah, is the only way that we're going to the next level of our metamorphosis in this world, in our lives, and in this phase of of where we're at. Like, without working on ourselves, everyone understands that we are doomed, like to either be insane, right, or to abuse and use like a lot of other like substances and things like that, to live a completely anxious life on so many different levels, right? To be highly medicated, right? Or, very often that leads to that we kind of face ourselves and we look at ourselves, we have that mirror, and we're like, oh, okay, this is not really sustainable any longer, right? We can't have like the Democrats hating everything about the Republican hating everything about the Democrats, and right, on a country level in the US, for example, and pretty much everywhere else in the world. But that works on a very personal and inner level in our family lives, in our inner lives. Like, it's unsustainable for us to not be doing that work and to do that inner transformation. So the leadership that we're really looking at now is this leadership of inner transformation. When we become leaders in that way, then we lift up this bandwidth, this Wi-Fi that's within the world, but that Wi-Fi is interconnected to all these other beautiful Wi-Fis that are doing the same. And once we all believe in that more and more and more, right? So our Wi-Fis actually amplify. And that collective Wi-Fi that comes from within, right? Within the world, within the existence, within us, that brings about what we call this collective goodness, right? Which is the aspect of Mashiach ben David, right? This aspect of really showing how this inner prevailing innate unity is found within all of us, and it's found within existence, all of existence. There's this innate oneness that's there, but that oneness is very diverse, but within the diversity, there is oneness. That diversity, it doesn't mean that everyone needs to be the same. Like the monarchy is like, well, I'm the king, and therefore I'm controlling that everyone should pretty much be doing the same stuff. Here, like, it's like, we're all different. And that's perfect. That's exactly the way it's supposed to be. There's a lot of hues, there's a lot of flavors, there's a lot of colors, there's a lot of sounds. That diversity is incredible. but that diversity needs to work into harmony. There's that harmony but that harmony could never work together if each instrument is not listening to the other instruments and they're not playing their part. So it's like the playing of our instrument that we need to do. So that instrument that we're playing, like that's our inner self. That's our real inner world, our inner self that we have awakened to, that we have come to, and that part, that's King David, we could say that, that messianic part of ourselves, which we really call our inner Mashiach, then is listening for the other instruments that are also playing, because it's not just playing alone, it's not just a soloist. And that beautiful harmony then becomes heard right throughout. So, and that's why, what did King David play? He was a musician. He was a poet. He played with his harp, right? And it says that the harp of King David was 7 strings, but the harp of Mashiach is going to be 8 strings, representing the within nature, but then the above nature. King David was the number 7, but then the Mashiach, the level of Mashiach is the level of above nature, that the above nature becomes revealed. So his music was the above nature music. Nazar tells us that this music that's going to be heard is going to be this music of taking the letters of the letter Yud, which is the highest form, the letter Hey, the letter Vav, the letter Hey, and the Yud is going to be spelled like Yud, and then it's going to be Yud, and then Hey, and then it's going to be spelled Yud and Hey, and then Vav. And it's called a double song, a triple song, and a quadruple song. This quadruple song is the song of all of creation, where the inanimate, the vegetative, the animal, and the human all sing together in unison, right? But also all of the 4 worlds, the world of Asiya, the world of Yetzirah, the world of Bria, and the world of Atzilut are all in harmony. They're all singing together. They're all connected, right? And this is the music. This is the music of Mashiach, right? And in the temple times, it says that this music was played by the Levites, right? Who played this beautiful song, going back to a little bit about the Levites, and this music was lost in the exile. Like, we lost this music, but this music is within the world. It's within creation. It's the harmonious sounds that are within nature, that are ready to be heard. It's whispered and it's ready to be really heard, and really harmonized. So on that note, on the beautiful harmony that we could envision and visualize, it's a great place for us to sort of go into, and God willing, I think that would make an amazing meditation. So I think I'm gonna delve into that, like something to think about for you guys to meditate on this notion of the King David harp, right? The harmony going from below to above, and basically being heard on the inanimate, on the vegetative, on the animal, and on the human realm, right? So on that note, I think I want to bless all of us really with leadership, with inner leadership. May we find that amazing point of Mashiach within us, and may we see that leadership really manifest itself, finally in the world, where we don't have losers and winners. We have, everyone is a winner, right? We all are winners. We are all working together and in harmony. Every part of creation and every part of ourselves. And so that's the beautiful redemption, that we're all really waiting for living in that place. So all of us doing that, doing that work on the, to the best and happiest way that we could do it, right? Staying in a positive frame of mind and learning, keep on learning, keep on, meditating, praying. They're all so important, to set aside time during the day to learn, to pray, to meditate, to connect to people that are like-minded. That's so important, so key, to make that into a practice too, because by doing that we all aid each other in reaching that. So yeah, so any questions, comments? All right. Well,
thank you, Rabbi.
Welcome. You're welcome, Diana. We welcome everyone. And again, may we keep those practices going and manifest that incredible Judah inside, right? Judah. God bless everyone. Shabbat shalom. See you next week.